This time, it's all about surveillance hut. Are you ready to face the fear? My high school had the vibe of a place that has been standing for 120 years, brimming with an intense spirit. The school building, having undergone numerous renovations, was oddly shaped in a way that even to the untrained eye, seemed bizarre. Despite being a rare single-story structure, there were stairs that led nowhere, specifically from the dead end of a hallway up towards the ceiling. Among other oddities were a music room located immediately after the entrance and classrooms that had been sealed off, their doors buried within the walls. From the outside, these sealed areas were conspicuously covered with plywood. But perhaps the most bizarre feature was something known as the surveillance cabin. Since I commuted from far away, there were times when I had no choice but to stay overnight at a friend's place or a teacher's apartment. However, on a day when I had nowhere else to turn, I decided to stay in the surveillance cabin. At first glance, the cabin seemed just like any ordinary house. It had an 8-mat room, an old-fashioned telephone, and a small kitchen. That night, I would come to understand firsthand why it was called the surveillance cabin. I wasn't alone. A friend was staying with me, and in the spirit of a school trip, we excitedly laid out our futons. As we were having dinner and chatting, the telephone suddenly rang. Startled, I answered the phone to find it was the janitor, who seemed concerned about us being two young women staying there alone. He advised us to not get too carried away and to be careful, and just before hanging up, he added, "Oh, I forgot. Make sure you close the curtains on the west side windows before you sleep." At the time, I dismissed his comment with a casual response, but upon reflection, his advice made no sense. The graveyard behind the school wasn't even in that direction. While discussing how strange it was, my friend casually opened the curtain. There, an old well, ominously strung with hemp rope, was in view. Blocked by the L-shaped school building and the cabin, it was something we hadn't noticed before, sending shivers down my spine instantly. Saying, "This feels creepy," we ended up sleeping huddled together on the same futon. I'm not sure how long I had been asleep before the cold on my shoulder woke me. Glancing around, I noticed my friend was gone. Assuming she went to use the toilet at the teacher's quarters, as our cabin didn't have one, I waited for her return. But she didn't come back. Peering outside, there were no signs of her returning from either the school or the teacher's quarters. Filled with anxiety, I returned to the room, and without thinking much about it, I opened the curtain of that previous window. There, in her underwear, my friend stood by the well, fiddling around her waist. Thinking, is she seriously going outside to relieve herself? I was about to close the curtain in disbelief, when a strange sensation gripped me, urging me to look once more toward the well, almost making me shout. What I had thought was her fiddling was actually her tying a rope around her waist. Now, she was squatting, attaching a large rock to the other end of the rope. I couldn't make a sound. Then, from the well, a pallid hand crept out, worming about as if searching for something before finally seizing the nearby rope. My friend simply hung her head, showing no sign of response. The hand slowly drew the rock toward itself, inch by inch. Though I tried to scream, no voice came out. Ah, A is being taken away. Just as that thought crossed my mind, the telephone's shrill ring sliced through the darkness. Startled by the sound, I found myself falling onto the futon. Feeling suddenly liberated from the paralysis, I dashed outside, barefoot, to my friend by the well, and somehow managed to drag her back to the cabin. After calling out to her for what seemed like ages, she finally came to and began to cry. Relieved from our fear, I also broke down in tears, and in a desperate attempt to seek help, I grabbed the telephone. Yet, as I did, both of us fell onto the futon again. I realized then that the telephone I had grasped, along with its handset, was merely a shell. Not only was it not connected by a wire, its insides were completely hollow. Later, I learned that since the school's opening, there was a series of students who attempted to end their lives by jumping into this well, leading to attempts to seal it. However, following a series of unfortunate events involving those connected to the sealing efforts, the plan was abandoned. Despite concealing the well during renovations, people would still find their way to it, leading to the establishment of the surveillance cabin to monitor the area. Yet, even a man stationed there for surveillance eventually succumbed to the same fate, and both the cabin and the well were left as they were. How did that warning call come through? And was the caller actually the man assigned to surveillance? How was it for everyone? The creeping anxiety on a quiet night and the eeriness of wells. There are things that are inexplicably scary, aren't there? For me, the dentist is the scariest. What about you? Do you have anything that scares you?